Hello, and welcome to Birthing Beyond Borders, a podcast where we share the stories of migrant moms from around the world. From sleepless nights to moments of joy, we'll be diving into the real, raw, and inspiring journeys of motherhood. Get ready to laugh, learn, and experience a range of emotions while being inspired. I am your host, Adejumoke Olopade, and together we'll uncover the challenges, celebrate the wins, and honor the wisdom mothers carry across borders. Welcome to our community space. In this episode of the Birthing Beyond Borders podcast, I have with me Amma, who is the Executive Director of the African Center for Community Development and the mother to two wonderful kids. Amma, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the Birthing Beyond Borders podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. I usually would start this conversation by having our guests tell us a little bit about themselves. So, what country are you from? How long have you lived in the US? What brought you to the US? Just tell us whatever you feel comfortable sharing with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa. I usually would say that it's the best country in Africa and the gateway to Africa. So, just for our listeners,
We can agree to disagree.
yes,
As long as you're not comparing jollof, in this conversation, I would accept that. It's okay. Don't worry.
yeah. um, I came to the US in 2019 to do a second master's program. And shortly after I came, there was COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic, which made it difficult to travel internationally. And
Mhm.
so, whatever I had planned, I needed to change trajectory, and which I think I think it's a good thing because I, got married and I have two wonderful kids, and I'm able to also serve my community. So
Mhm.
I think that whatever happened for a reason because yeah,
Mhm.
it's created as for my community members. Yeah.
Awesome. Um, this is a question that I don't typically ask my guests, but what drew you to the African Center for Community Development? How did you end up there?
So I joined the center in 2020 actually. Because my program was supposed to be 2 years, and due to COVID, I couldn't
Mm.
travel out to do my international internship. I did it online, and then the center had just started programming, and everything moved online. They were doing after school program with elementary and middle school students, teaching them African cultures and grounding them in the African heritage. And then after that, just for a couple of months, and I realized that there was the need to keep serving the community. And when I came, I really sought out
Mm.
the African community here. And I felt that the support I got from some of the
Mm.
community members and was also encouraged by them. I wanted to provide the same experience and even go beyond to find resources that community members need and also contribute to community building, which we need the most. Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds like such purposeful work. And I'm really excited. As somebody who's worked with the African Center and seen firsthand some of the programming, I'm really grateful for the kind of work that you do for the community members. So thank you. And big shout out to the African Center.
Thank
Um,
you.
You're very welcome. At this point, I want us to transition a little bit to, talk about like your childbirth experience. And so I want you to take us through the moment you found out you were pregnant with your first kid. Because, I don't know if the experience is different finding out for the first time or like, with the second baby. But the moment you found out you were pregnant with your first baby girl, um, what was that feeling like?
um So, my first baby girl, she would be 3 in a month. Um,
Mhm.
I remember that, you know, before we found out, we were just curious. And so, I wasn't into surprises. So I'm like, okay, going to find out. And I personally, I wouldn't even watch birthing videos. I Even in the movie, I won't watch that. I wasn't interested in anything in that regard, right? So didn't engage in conversations about birthing, right? So it was just interesting that, like, when my first baby, my husband and I went to a restaurant, said, "Oh, we should have a nice dinner." And then we go and find out. And I I enjoyed the dinner, and I we found out, and I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm gonna have a baby. That's it. And to be honest, I didn't even start researching about it. So he was the one who started reading a lot about, childbirth, and, I was like, oh, this is normal. I have, at least, even though I don't engage in those conversations, I've heard people talk about it. It's just going to be a breeze. Yeah. I didn't even read about maybe pains or throwing up in the different stages, the baby's development. I wasn't even interested in reading anything. I'm like, because I had this, I think probably an infantile idea that, okay, you get pregnant, after 9 months, the baby is born, right? So that was
And
all.
it just goes by. 9 months just like flies by.
Yeah. So that was, um, I had a pretty good pregnancy. I heard that some people will throw up in the first trimester or second trimester,
Okay.
but I didn't throw up. I I was strong.
Mhm.
Yeah, everything went well. So I started having like some pregnancy pains at my 7th month.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yeah, just a little bit. And it was when I went into labor that was the difficult part of the pregnancy.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Thank you for, sharing your experience with us. I heard you say it was your husband that was doing the researching, the reading. And that takes me to my next question. I was wondering, it sounds like he was doing quite a lot of the preparation in a sense, but preparation can be in different forms. It could be reading books, it could be listening to podcasts on like childbirth and pregnancy. What kind of preparations do you think prepared you for the journey ahead? What helped, what made it difficult, what kind of things did you do to, hey, maybe avoid having morning sickness or things like that?
Yeah. Um, I didn't do any conscious preparation except that I noticed dietary changes.
Okay.
Um, I started craving pineapples. I ate pineapples a lot. And I remember when I started craving that, my husband went to the grocery store and bought, a lot of canned pineapples,
Mhm.
like about 10 because they were on sale. And he got to the cashier, and the cashier was looking at him like it was a woman
Mhm.
looking at him in a funny way.
Mhm.
And he said he felt the urge to explain. He was like, "Oh, we are going to have a baby."
And this is all my wife wants.
Yeah, yes. And the cashier was like, "Oh, congrats! What are you having?" And he said, "The baby." He didn't even know that he had to say that boy or a girl, but he
Mhm.
said the baby because that
Mhm.
was a new
Yeah.
experience. And all I'll eat is pineapple and tacos, actually.
Okay.
Specific tacos. It's called lengua tacos. So the caltang And so I would go to these restaurants. In fact, they knew me because I ate there a lot, and we would also order from them. So jokingly said that the first word my daughter would say is "Hola." She would speak Spanish right away because I've eaten too many tacos. Yeah, but yeah, I realized that I still, there was what was good at the hospital was they had birthing classes.
Okay.
So, we went through it. Some were online,
Mhm,
some had videos.
mhm,
I wasn't really into the videos. I just wanted to go in and listen to them.
mhm,
And we did a lot of exercises. That was in the last trimester.
mhm,
And yeah, but they didn't really talk about, so they talk about um contractions and preparing for labor,
mhm,
but I still had no idea.
mhm,
I've had no idea. Felt okay, there'll be contractions.
mhm,
It's going to be like period cramps and
mhm,
of your baby, right? I didn't know that even labor could take more than 24 hours.
mm,
Um, I sort of missed all that because I didn't really read about it.
mm,
And yeah, I had my big sister had all her three kids
mhm,
when I was in Ghana. So I didn't really, I guess I was never curious about her birthing experience, so I didn't ask about it.
mhm,
Um, you know, they would call to check on me. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And yeah, so it was again during labor and yeah, that I realized that childbirth is not an easy thing.
It's not
Yeah.
a joke. Yeah. Um, I heard you say that you didn't like use the videos as much. I was just wondering why. What about the videos, why didn't you use them? Did you not find them interesting? Why didn't you use them?
You know, I'm someone who never liked biology. so so I thought the videos were a little intrusive.
Yeah, okay.
Those
Yeah.
lives, the privacy,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
yeah, I don't want to watch
Yeah.
what other people go through, and yeah, so that is
Yeah.
I didn't get into it.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think and I think that that's why it's very important to have different resources for different people. People have preferences. Some people like to just go into these birthing classes and just listen to like the nurses or the midwives, and some people like to see things. They're visual learners. So I think that just kind of speaks to the importance of having different options for mothers.
And I think that what would have also helped is storytelling. If
Uh,
I like listening to people's experiences, right? Real people. So if there were like actual sessions where someone will come and tell about their
mhm,
birthing journey,
mhm,
I will listen to it and
mhm,
probably could have related. But if
mhm,
those videos, I thought that they were just standard videos and I
mhm.
wasn't
Yeah.
really into it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was no connection. And I think that, that's why we're doing this. Hopefully, this would be very
Exactly.
helpful
Hmm.
for new moms, who need that personal connection as well.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about the cultural aspect of, pregnancy and childbirth. For a lot of Africans, when they move to the US or, other countries outside of home, there are certain cultural practices that they might have wanted to follow, that they probably don't have the opportunity to do so here. So I was wondering, are there cultural practices for you? For example, I have friends who had their babies, were pregnant here in the US and said stuff like, well, there are some herbs or like things like, that my mom would have given to me to just like help me prevent morning sickness or just things like that. Or, somebody could have said, well, for us, we have so groups that we attend, they're just like different cultural things. I was wondering, are there cultural things that you had thought you were going to do during pregnancy that you couldn't do here in the US?
No, no. I am a very private person, and I've learned to open up a lot, especially thanks to my work. So I didn't even
Mm-hmm.
ask about those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I didn't know about the herbs, so what people do culturally. Yeah, because I didn't seek out for those advice. Yeah. So I was just going through it and seeing how the experience is like. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And in terms of like healthcare providers, how did they impact your pregnancy journey and your childbirth experience? Were there moments where you felt, this healthcare provider definitely played a huge role in like providing support or providing information, or were there times where you felt, well, this experience has left a really negative impression on me?
So I had different experiences with both kids.
Okay.
So my first pregnancy, I was with midwives,
Okay.
and I had four midwives that I will consult, and
Mm.
they changed every time.
Okay.
But one of them, um, you know, didn't make my experience a great one.
Okay.
So anytime we went, and for my first pregnancy, my husband was with me for, I think, almost all of the hospital visits.
Mhm.
And he was really involved, so he would ask questions. And for some reason I felt that this midwife didn't really like us.
Mm.
So she um wasn't really helpful.
Mhm.
And she, I feel like her treatment um would have had a negative impact on the outcome of my birth, should we have had her when I was in active labor.
Okay.
Why am I saying this? The week before I had my baby, so my first child, both my kids were a week late. So the week before I had my first child, I thought I was in labor
Mhm.
because of the contractions and the first time, and of having a baby and all that. So we um so I saw my water had broke, and my husband, let's go to to check at the hospital,
Mhm.
then just wonder. So we went, and she was there,
Mhm.
and we went to the triage, and she was like, why should you come in? If you are not sure that you are in labor, you shouldn't come in.
Like, how would you know? It's your first time.
Exactly. So we felt that it seems our coming in was a waste of time,
Mhm.
um,
Mm.
a waste of her time. And
Mm.
that wasn't a good experience. And anytime
Mhm.
and even before then, we met about 3 or 4 times, and the visits weren't great. So anytime they wanted to schedule
Okay.
a visit, I made sure not to go to her again. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so we got so out of the four midwives, one of them had to move out of state. So she changed jobs, and
Okay.
we had three, and this terrible one. So the other two were great, and out of the two, there was one that I really preferred because she was very communicative, understanding, and
Mhm.
also made us realize that this is the first time, so just feel. And so I was really hoping that I should be there during labor and childbirth, and thank God she was there. So the terrible one,
Mhm.
why she made us feel that way, the day I was in actual labor, I wasn't sure whether I was in labor or not, because I wouldn't want to come and also and make them feel
Mhm.
that we are wasting their time. So here I was
Yeah.
in labor,
Right.
and I started crocheting. I crocheted a hat for my baby.
Mm.
So I remember I was in labor. It started um I think Monday night, like Monday 6 p.m., and I started crocheting. And yeah, and um my husband was doing his work. So he came out around 9 p.m. and he saw me on all fours, and he was like, "What's happening?" And I said, "Well, probably I'm in labor, I'm not sure." And he wanted us to go right away. But I said, "Well, we need to make sure because this nurse said we shouldn't come in." So we stayed, and we stayed longer, and around we called the hospital around 10, and they told us to come in right away, but we still delayed till 1 a.m. um Tuesday before going. And when we went, they said yes, it's actual labor, and they had to call the good midwife,
Mhm.
and she came in. Yeah, and so because of that, I had after birth, and I had my labor was almost 72 hours. Yes, it was a long and hard one. And so, and I gave birth to God. And yeah, so she was really, really helpful.
Mhm.
And it wasn't an easy childbirth,
Mhm.
but I thank God I'm baby and I survived.
Mhm.
Then after that, I had bacterial infection.
Mm.
So I had to be hospitalized for 3 days. 2 weeks after my baby was born, I also had back pain, my neck. It was so my early days after childbirth was very, very, very difficult because I was very, very sick.
Mhm.
But yeah, and my second one, I have a 6 month old. So for the second pregnancy, we decided to go with a doctor.
Okay.
So we'll see how that experience was like. And this doctor, she was also pregnant with her second
Oh
child.
wow.
And I shared my first experience with
Mhm.
her, and 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 sometimes I ask questions, and
Mhm.
she was like, "Yeah, it's okay to ask."
Mhm.
I said, "Yeah, I'm not an expert in childbirth, so yeah." But she was understanding, and she would explain a lot of things, and yeah, and even though she wasn't there, because she had given birth a few weeks before, prior to my birth, she her colleagues were great, and I had a much better experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm glad, you had a better experience with your second baby. And I'm also glad that during the first childbirth that you had the good midwife, And I think that pregnancy is such a it's such a vulnerable moment that as mothers all the support and help and you need to get it, and you don't need to feel like you don't know what you're doing or you're a burden to somebody whose job it is to like make you feel protected and safe and
Right.
help you throughout the process. So and I know that your situation or your story or experience might not be unique to you. I'm sure that there's some other women who have been through things like that. And, as women, we should not be made to feel that way. So thank you for acknowledging that and just sharing that experience with us.
This episode of Birthing Beyond Borders is funded by the 4W Initiative and supported by the African Center for Community Development. Please check out these two wonderful organizations. Details can be found in the description below.
Real quickly, I want us to move to like the postpartum recovery. I heard you say that the first few weeks after childbirth was not the easiest for you because you were sick. I'm wondering what kind of support was available to you in that moment. Did you have friends or family come stay with you during postpartum?
Yeah, so for my first pregnancy, it was I'm grateful for the support I received.
Mm,
So first was my husband's support, very supportive. My husband's mom
mm,
came actually the very um, day that I gave birth. So she got there a few hours after birth, and held the baby, visited for a day,
mm,
and then she had to back to work. So she lives in another state, so she had to go back. And I have my host parents.
right.
When I first moved here, is there is a wonderful family that welcomed me. They have been my parents, my American parents here. They stood in for me during my wedding, so they were there to support me. And then my friends, I have they're a couple, so a husband and wife.
Mm,
They were amazing. Aside God, I owe my life to them. Because I remember when I had to be admitted,
mm,
but I had my 2-week-old baby. So my husband had to stay with me at the emergency ward. And so we called, our friends. They both came, took the baby, and they watched the baby till, after midnight when my husband had to come back from emergency ward. And throughout and I was admitted. And so it was when I came back, they would babysit,
mhm,
watch the baby, and that was wonderful. So I feel like I was well supported by my friends and
mm.
my husband's family. And when my baby turned 8 months, my mom came to
Okay.
visit for 6 months, and so that was uh, after my baby turned a year and 2 months, she had to go. And, and so that was also very helpful. So as soon as she went, we had to enroll her in daycare. For my second baby, I was grateful my mom was able to come um, a week or two before childbirth. So my mom came
Mhm.
and before I gave birth. So that was also like for me, I feel that I've been privileged
Mm,
compared to my peers
mm,
in both childbirth because I have had very good support. And my mom left actually a couple of weeks ago, and the very day she left, we took our baby to daycare because we were very grateful for the help and
mhm.
couldn't have done without her. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, it sounds like, you're very lucky to have had your mother-in-law, your mom, your friends, your American parents, and just like had a community of support. So I'm so
Yes.
glad to hear that. Um, I heard you talk about things that that they did to provide support to you. So like washing the baby, babysitting the baby. I was wondering if there are other things that they provided in terms of support. So like physical things, like you mentioned, or like emotional support. How did they really like support your recovery process?
For for my second baby, my mom did basically everything for us.
Mm,
I so I was supposed to take time off work,
mm,
but because of the support I received from her, I felt that I could go back to work, if a few weeks after. So I started working from home quite early.
okay.
She will help, do laundry for on the family. She'll help clean. She'll make food. Yeah, she was very, very supportive.
Okay.
Yeah, she basically did everything. So
Okay.
that was nice.
Yeah.
For my first baby, my support network was great. I just needed to get the baby washed and provide the food that the baby would take, and whoever was when the baby sits,
Mm-hmm.
they will feed the baby,
Mm-hmm.
help. Um, if the baby is not washed and the baby's with them, yeah, sure. But it was making sure the baby was alive.
Knowing fully well that both babies are alive, I'm glad they did a great job by keeping the
Yeah,
babies
they
alive.
did.
That's
They
good.
did.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about postpartum and like mental health and like mental recovery after having a baby. What was that like for you? And I know that for women who have support, a lot of times the experiences might be a little bit different from women who did not have like support that you had. So I was wondering if you could talk through like just like the recovery emotionally and like mentally, what was that like for you? And did you experience postpartum depression? Were you anxious about anything? And if you didn't, what do you think kind of served as a protective factor for you?
Actually, as I said, both pregnancies and childbirth were different.
Mm.
For when my mom was here and visiting with us, yeah, the recovery was smoother. She, you know, I I came back and it didn't even look like I had a baby
Yeah.
because I jumped on a work call right away from my way back from the hospital
Mm-hmm.
with my 2-day-old baby. I joined a work call, and when I came, I sort of was following up with work and was cooking sometimes in the early days. And so my mom decided that she made her own food better than I would I would do. So she started making her own food. Yeah. So mental health wise, I think I was in a pretty good place.
Mm-hmm.
Um Not a lot of depression, or I think the most pressure I got was, from work,
Mm-hmm.
just making sure that I was able to assume my responsibilities and do my work well. That was what was most important to me
Okay.
for my second baby.
Mm-hmm.
But for my first one, I worried a lot about what if what happens to my baby if I die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the reason, as I said, I was very, very sick. I like it was, um, horrible. Basically, I couldn't turn my neck. My neck, it was painful.
Mm-hmm.
My, I have, it's normal when you give birth, you have sore breast because um, especially when the baby is not latching
Mm-hmm.
well, and my baby couldn't latch well. And the nurses that came in, I think I would have um I I felt a lot of pressure from how they were teaching lactation.
Okay.
So if they had said that it was fine, a newborn baby is not supposed to be full
Mm-hmm.
and they can survive without eating much for 2 days,
Mm-hmm.
I would have relaxed because I thought that, and again, I didn't take all the birthing lessons. So
Yeah.
I thought that, the baby needed to eat and to be well. So I felt that pressure on me to make sure my baby was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone who came in taught how to make sure the baby latched in a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
so with in my mind, I felt that I wasn't doing the right thing and I needed to do things right. And
Mm-hmm.
so with my second baby, I just understood that. So whilst I was forcing myself to make sure my baby got nourished,
Mhm.
I put pressure on my neck because I
Mhm.
really, really wanted her to latch and to be fine and survive. So that resulted in my neck hurting and basically my backbone.
Mhm.
And so the fourth day, I remember waking up in the night. We were at my host parents, eh, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't breathe. I was just in pain. And so they took the baby, and my husband had to go to the pharmacy. We called the Good Midwife, and um, she said we could get some painkillers. She gave us a prescription.
Okay.
And my husband went to the hospital, the pharmacy to get the medication. And yeah, it still wasn't working because I I had this pressure on me
Mhm.
that like I need to make sure that my baby is fine,
Mhm.
you know. And
Yeah.
so in the morning, we had to rush to a chiropractor, and my 4-day-old baby was very patient with me.
Okay.
And yeah, so I had to go through chiropractor visits,
Mhm.
you know, yeah, in addition to going to visit a lactation consultant and
Mhm.
going for the postnatal visit and all that.
Yeah.
But in all, I just thought that if someone had told me it's fine if the
Mhm.
baby doesn't eat a lot,
Mhm.
so you shouldn't force yourself, I think my experience would have been different.
Mm. Mm.
But I'm grateful for the support I received.
Yeah, I had a guest on the podcast also talk about the pressure that she felt to feed a baby. And she said that, she wasn't producing, and so as a result, she told the nurses to give the baby formula because she just felt like she was failing at doing what she needed to do as a mom, and she felt that pressure
Exactly.
to just like make sure that the baby was not starving. And so just hearing you talk about if you had had somebody tell you that it's okay, their tummy is so small, their stomach is really small, and they don't need so much food. So I hope that this sentence reassures a new mom who is probably listening to this, to just extend grace to themselves and just understand that it would happen. You just have to be patient with yourself. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I also want to tell new moms that it's fine to give your baby formula the first day. That is okay because we are told your colostrum is the best
Mhm.
for your baby, which is true. But if you are not producing a lot of milk at the very first time, that is okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, because your baby will survive,
Mhm.
and then you produce your milk and your baby will take the colostrum, and they will grow beautifully.
Mhm.
But we need to again give ourselves that grace. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, in terms of like culture and religious practices or religion as a whole, did that play a role in like your overall recovery during the postpartum period?
Yes, yes. Now my mom is she prays a lot. She's a very devout Christian. So, she would pray. And I remember when I was even in labor, and they had, so because it was long,
Mhm.
the midwife came and said that, okay, because they had tried almost everything, by 6 p.m. that Thursday, if the baby was not out yet, they will have to do a C-section.
Mhm.
So I wasn't ready for that because of at least that one I learned. I have heard that, the recovery from that it takes a while.
Mhm.
So I called my mom. I'm like, Ma, you have to pray because that time it was almost midnight in Ghana.
Mhm.
And she was also, sleeping and very worried because we kept updating her. And I said she should pray. That was the time to pray, And so I'll say that it was just prayers. And when I had my baby, after learning how to wash the baby at the hospital, I came home and I had to do that myself. So I would pray that God should help me, give me the strength to take care of the baby. And I prayed every time I was the baby. I blessed the baby. I just kept blessing the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, as humans, we are powerful, and regardless of whether we are religious or not, we should say positive words to our babies, because it has an impact on them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. Um, I guess in terms of like the resources and systems that kind of supported you during pregnancy, or postpartum, what kind of resources or systems did you use or rely on? And I heard you talk about like the betting classes, which you seem to have like learned a lot of things from. But did you use doulas? Did you have community organization or faith spaces that helped you kind of just like navigate pregnancy or childbirth?
I hadn't even heard of doulas. I recently learned about them. Um, in terms of um support systems, so religious organizations. My first pregnancy, my church organized baby shower, which was really, really nice, and I'm grateful for them. And then after birth, a couple of church members came by to, they kept asking what did I need.
Mm-hmm.
Could they help me? So a couple of people came by to um wash the baby, but by the time they came, I felt that I could do everything myself. So, and because of the support system that I already had,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to overuse this
Mm-hmm.
support,
Yeah.
because there were other people who needed it the most.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm grateful
Mm-hmm.
to my church and to everyone that's came in to give support. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And were there services or resources that you wish you had known about or that you wish you had access to during pregnancy or postpartum?
There were some of the resources I knew about because of my work, and
Mm-hmm.
I would refer people to.
Mm-hmm.
But I I didn't really seek them out,
Okay.
because again, I felt that I was supported by my close friends
Mm-hmm.
and network that I had.
Mm-hmm.
But when we did the African Mothers Hangout,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that, if we had something like that in place before, it would have been great, because mothers will come together and share their experiences, or network or talk, and then you'll understand what others have been through. So I think that within our own community, creating safe spaces for people to share their experiences
Mm-hmm.
would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, I think that sometimes, not necessarily based on my experience, because my family wasn't into advising me on how to watch the baby
Mm-hmm.
or feed the baby, but sometimes I hear that there's a lot of pressure from back home, where some people are basically told you have to give the baby water or wash the baby this way, you
Mm-hmm.
know um treat the baby this way, uh, even teaching you how to put the baby to sleep, and you, the mom, how to eat certain foods.
Right.
to recover and all that. Yeah, I got some advice like that, which were not necessarily solicited, but I I just I did what worked for me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it worked for me, and yeah, I'm grateful that what I did that worked for me was sufficient. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and and I heard you talk about some of this unsolicited advice. I think a lot of times, people can be really well-meaning, but as a new mom, it could be very overwhelming too sometimes, when like there's like information coming from every angle and you're just very overwhelmed and you're thinking to yourself, well, which one should I do? So I'm like you said, just doing what works for you, I think is definitely the way to go. And you've honestly transitioned us to like our last segment here. And I just want to kind of get a sense of if you were in a position or if you had a new mom who was just moving to the US um and who's pregnant and having a baby, what advice would you give to such women?
I will say that they should feel free to share their concerns with their healthcare provider.
Okay.
So, be it a midwife or a doctor, they should share their concerns. And if they feel that they are not well treated or respected,
Mm-hmm.
they should speak out. Because sometimes when we are coming in, we are new to the system, we don't really know um, who to turn to when we feel that we are not being heard, right? And things could be fatal if you are quiet. So just talk to your healthcare provider, uh, regardless of what you think your question is, how basic it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk to your
Mm-hmm.
healthcare provider.
Mm-hmm.
And two, make good use of the free resources around.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of free resources, free diaper banks, um, actually, free baby clothes. Yeah, just do research or reach out to community organizations
Mm-hmm.
and seek the free resources because that's going to help your budget a lot.
Right.
And three, um you know listen to what others experiences have been. You may and bec- we all have unique experiences, right? But listen and see what you would do with the information you get.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have to follow every unsolicited advice,
See?
but just being open to getting more information
Mm-hmm.
would be good. Sometimes some people feel that, they would rather rely on advice from back home, but sometimes the people advising them may have never been to the US before,
Mm-hmm.
may probably do not understand the
This
systems
is true.
here.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And because back home, as soon as you are pregnant, probably either your mom moves in or your mother-in-law moves in to be
Mm-hmm.
with you throughout the entire pregnancy,
Mm-hmm.
or you move to your parents and they will support you. But here it's not like that. No one is going to move in to support you because they have to go to work
Right.
and pay their rent.
Yeah, everybody has their own responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, or pay their mortgage,
Mhm.
right? And so it's totally different.
Mhm.
So, just making sure that you are balancing the advice you are getting. Yeah.
This was such great advice. Thank you so much. And I think, like you said, as a new mom in a new city or new country, it's important to do research, find out what resources are available, what you can get for free, save as much as you can, because I've heard babies are not cheap. So, if you can get certain things for free, you might as well, take advantage of it. And so my very last question to you, Amma, before I let you go, is what would you say to healthcare providers or organizations that provide care to African immigrant mothers? What would you say to them that could hopefully help them provide better service or care to these women?
I'll say that they it would be great if they could include cultural literacy in uh, their practice. Um, you know, why cultural literacy? So, in general, um, Africans are reserved when they are in a new space. Someone is new in the country, or new to childbirth, or new to the hospital system, or even new to the doctor or midwife or nurse, right? So just being just educating themselves about, okay, um, you know, different cultures would be good, so that when someone is not necessarily speaking up or about what the experience is, they would be patient enough and to with the person, and their patience will help build that trust
Mhm.
that they need to provide culturally responsive care.
Mhm.
Because we need to, I wouldn't say necessarily reserve, but we build trust gradually,
Mhm.
and we build trust when we see that you care, because you listen and you are
Mhm.
patient with us. So that is what I would say. And also, if they see that there's a certain demographic that are using their resources or coming to hospital there, I think it would be nice for them to reach out to um, organizations you know, that work with that specific population, or that are related to the population, just to have a conversation, to understand a little bit, because going that extra mile is helpful for both the well-being of the mother as well as the child,
Yeah.
because there's a lot to navigate. And even native born, um I'll rephrase, Americans um uh who have their whole family here, they still may not know everything in the system. How much more someone who is new to the system? So, I think that educating themselves about different contexts is fine. If it's even general knowledge, it's helpful, so that they can encourage new mothers to speak up uh, about their experiences, and also create a channel of communication for them, because
Mhm.
communication barriers may not only be language, but also um, a- adequately expressing your need. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. This is such great point. Thank you so much, Amma, for mentioning them. And I also just want to say a big thank you to you and the staff members at the African Center for Community Development for the work that you do for the community. Again, as somebody who has experienced and seen it firsthand, I am just so grateful for the work that you all do. Thank you for being a great representation, of what it means to show up for your community. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me this afternoon on the podcast.
Yeah, and thank you so much for choosing to partner with us for such a wonderful project. And I believe and I'm confident that as mothers hear about um the experiences we are sharing, and healthcare providers also listen to it, we can all contribute to making the system better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Thank you again. This is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening and have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Birthing Beyond Borders. I hope you've learned something new or felt seen in today's conversation. If you're a mom listening today, know that you're doing an incredible job, and as a community, we are so proud of you. Please share this episode with another mom or with a friend who might find it helpful. Remember, you are not alone, and you don't need permission to do the things that bring you joy. I'm rooting for you. Goodbye.